Before we go into open source, I think one of the reasons I know a bit about this is this was one of my day job before we getting aligned with associated with Moset, right? The job was about picking up softwares that actually build a commercial grade operating system, which is called Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And the challenge was like, okay, you have 26 million project at that point of time in GitHub. And from there, we need to only choose roughly 2,000 projects to build an operating system. So a lot of things get evaluated in the process, but one of the key things that get evaluated is the licensing. Can this software that we select, can it actually play well with all of the components that we ship as part of the operating system? And this is the same thing that happens with every platform project, because the platform project always are dependent on other projects, and every project has different licenses, and we need to make sure that we comply with those licenses. Now, when we start with open source, and the way we define, or the way the open source contributors used to define open source is like, because many people equate open source to software, right? Saying that, like, look, the software, open source means software, but in reality, open source is a development model or a collaboration model where the outcome is a software, or it could be a documentation, or it could be a standard. Like, there could be different outcomes that can come out of that community. But in essence, again, the open source as a model is where we see people collaborate or come together, try to solve a problem, and the outcome of that has been shared with the larger community. And if others take interest in those projects or those outcomes, that's when the community get formed, and we start seeing growth in that open source community. So if you look into the typical journey of someone who's starting with open source project, is I think we all start with using open source project. I think in a day-to-day life, we touch multiple open source components while browsing our internet or using various products on mobile apps or as well as on the laptops, because a lot of things, like if you start thinking of like Firefox as a browser, and when we type in, say, a particular URL that goes through multiple open source components, be it the DNS servers, be it the SSL layer, there are different layers that are built using open source components we touch, and we use a lot of projects day in and day out. And then from there we go, some of us go into the deeper, into the projects to understand like how it is being done, and how it can be leveraged into something that we are trying to do, because from that interest we can get to know that how to use it and then to modify it. Because when we learn a project, or when we start contributing or start following a project, that's when the ideas come, and that's when the modification or the contributions or any kind of contributions start happening. And finally it comes to a stage where there could be some missing components we identify, and for the larger purpose of the community, we end up building some of the components and share it with the community members, and that becomes a project by itself. So that's the typical way of we cannot classify an open source journey, from starting with usage to ending up with we build component back with the community. When you look into open source as a key component into whatever we are building, right? Be it the platform, be it a solution, be it a service, there are various advantages it can offer, because one of the primary thing is you are in control of your code. You're not being locked in by any vendor relationship, and you work with the community. You kind of contribute it back to make sure that, okay, the community remains, or the project remains sustainable. And if for some reason, if the project is not doing well, or the contributors are kind of vanishing, but it's a critical project for the platform that you are building or the service you are building, you do have the option to continue to use it by investing more resource onto the project and keep it alive and continue to run with it. So that's one of the advantages in terms of there is no vendor lock-in. And second, it comes in a greater efficiency, right? Because one of the things that open source enables is like, we don't start from scratch, because when you think about a particular service or a new app, there's always like a starting point where we can always kind of get a few components which are the building blocks to get started. So we don't end up reinventing the wheel again and again to say that I'm going to build a service, I'm going to reinvent everything from scratch, and which can become a pretty expensive affair in terms of building those things. It also kind of have an impact in time to market. So there are various kind of things that can be avoided if you start with open source components or open source building blocks. And also, it also helps us in building interoperable framework, because since it has been built on open source building blocks, and others can also choose to use the same building blocks, and it becomes like the layer that we built above, it becomes easily interoperable with various kind of exchanges that applications do. Coming to the cost, I think yes, it does offer reduction in cost in one sense, because you're always starting with some of the reusable components, so your cost and the time to market is kind of reduced. But I'll not say that the cost is completely gone by using open source software. There's always a cost associated in terms of either you're putting more developers into maintaining or kind of enhancing the software that you're using, or you're kind of paying a third-party developer or an entity to kind of manage those components. So, but it is always a reduced cost because of the starting point being enabled by the existing Lego blocks. I think we cannot touch upon these things in terms of fosters growth, and growth can be looked into from different angles. Growth from the ecosystem adoption point of view, because if we cannot build on open source and open standards, it becomes easy for ecosystem to adopt those standards or those APIs and start building other layers on top of it. Because it's always good to kind of see that when you're leveraging open source, building open APIs ecosystems, the usage model is the one that we kind of see that, like, how the project is kind of sustaining, how the project is growing, how we are seeing the consumers enabling different layers that is not coming back to the core team as an implementation request. Okay, so let's get into some of the common myths, I think, when it comes to usage of open source components or integrating open source components into your project. So it starts with the ownership discussion in terms of, like, okay, when you're building a project and you're starting to consume multiple libraries or multiple projects into your platform. So there could be various questions, starting with licensing. I think licensing is something that Srijani will cover later, but apart from licensing, it is also about how well you choose the components, right? And making sure that you don't want to end up in a situation that you built everything and then you realize that the project that you rely on is no more maintained, right? So kind of understanding the health of the project that you're going to consume is also an important thing, saying that. And the health of the project is being looked in from various attributes, starting with what's kind of the participation there and how frequently they make the releases and how frequently they addresses the issues that is being raised by the user. So those are the various metrics that kind of help us understand, is this the right project to be integrated? Because once you integrate and you ship the product, right, you might be integrating multiple projects and then you're shipping a product to your customer. That product ownership lies on you, right? Because that's a product that you need to support maybe for the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, right? And so every component on that also need to be maintained when you're actually having a supported product to your end customer. So ownership need to be looked at in a way that what liabilities you're going to inherit by integrating different projects and how healthy are those projects, and then kind of making sure that, again, the ownership or the maintenance can be enabled. The license, I think the license part is where when you integrate with multiple components, there are different kind of license, be it permissible, copyleft, or the license that allow you to be more restrictive with what you're doing. But I'll say the most critical point in license is when you integrate multiple software projects, and every community choose to have their own licenses, right? Somebody is in Apache 2, somebody is using MIT's or GPL3, but you're developing a software which you're going to use a particular license. So to kind of making sure that how all these licenses kind of interplay and make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you need to kind of pull back the product because of the license incompatibilities. I think Srijani will touch upon the licensing part much detail. The third popular misconception is about the product itself and the usage of the product and how is the data being managed, the data that is by this product or by this service, does the data also fall into the same licensing policies? It does not, because you using the software and you distributing the software are two different things. Like when you are delivering a service, and if the service is collecting data that is for that particular ecosystem or for a particular purpose, that is governed by the ecosystem policies in terms of what it is. It is completely decoupled from the license of the project or the program that you are using to deliver that particular service. So data does not need to follow the same licensing option of the project that you are using. And finally, the cost part, I think we kind of touched upon it briefly in terms of, yes, it reduces the cost, it reduces differently, but yes, there is a cost involved with even using open source components when it comes to integrations or kind of extending it. So there will be always a maintenance cost associated with it. Either you do it yourself or you'll be leveraging the service of a service provider to manage that particular cost. I think the popular misconception around open source, and it's not something that is difficult to manage, because these are best practices that we can look into when we look into projects like MOSIP, or look into projects like Linux distributions, or look into projects like Kubernetes, where none of these projects are a single program or a single project, because it's a collection of multiple projects and the different licensing all coming together to provide a seamless user experience, right, end of the day, because that's what the customers expect us to deliver, a seamless user experience. I think from that point of view, yes, these misconceptions can be avoided, and we can actually plan things better. And with that, I will give it to Srijani for licensing.
Thank you, Satish, and good afternoon, everyone. I think Satish spoke about open source for governments from the development perspective and the advantages of that. But when it comes to consumption of the open source products, right, there is code out there. What can I do with it? That often boils down to questions around licensing. That this open source code has been made available under a particular license. What does that license actually require me to do? What can I do with it? What can I not do with it? And therefore, what does that mean for my own product development or my incorporation of this open source code into my projects? So particularly when it comes to governments, or when it comes to private companies, or when it comes to donors, as lawyers, most of the questions we have to handle are around our choice of licensing and what that means. So I thought we would take this opportunity to describe the landscape of open source licensing as we see it, how that in our mind applies to DPIs, particularly in the Global South context, and finally how we arrived at our choice of licensing for MOSIP and all the other associated products that are also coming out of IIIT Bangalore, and a little bit about how we see the future of licensing grow in this sector. So just to give an overview, and this is, I would be perhaps familiar to many of you, but there are three large categories of open source licenses, right? There's multiple different licenses that different institutions have developed according to their own needs. It's generally encouraged to adopt a standard license rather than come up with your own one, so that those sets of terms and conditions are familiar to the community. And once you know that a piece of open source code is under an MIT or an Apache or a GPL, you immediately know what that means without having to familiarize yourself with a new set of legal documents. So that is why, while there are a large number of open source licenses, some of them are quite popular. And by and large, the open source community sort of makes a choice about what is the strategy that they want to pursue, and therefore how their licensing choice gets impacted. And all of these licenses can broadly be categorized into these three categories. And generally, it's believed that there might be differences of opinion on this, that this kind of moves from the least permissive to the most permissive set of license conditions. The least permissive set of licenses are generally what is known as the copyleft licenses. These generally do have the strictest terms, and they come with a very strong point of view that if you are consuming open source code, then that work must continue to grow in open source. Right? That perspective is baked into these copyleft licenses. And while there are different terms in it, and I don't want to go into too much detail, the main thing about copyleft licenses is that if you are using even one or two components that carry a copyleft license in it, and if you're combining those components with other work of your own to create what is called a larger work or a derived product, then the entire product must also be shared under the same license term. So GPL and LGPL are two common examples of copyleft licenses. And use of GPL or LGPL code means that even if it is a few components in your larger work, that larger work must then be distributed under GPL or LGPL code. There is a lot of fear-mongering sometimes, particularly these days, around copyleft licenses. And I don't want to say that this is so restrictive that it is, can't be used, etc. All it does mean is that your work also must continue on in open source. If you are taking the contributions of the open source community, then you must also contribute into that stream. Right? But that is generally regarded as the most restrictive set of licenses. I'll jump ahead to the most permissive set of licenses, and these essentially say you can do whatever you like with the code, you just can't sue us. Right? Your use of the code doesn't mean that if something goes wrong in it, you can sue us for those difficulties. Those are some of the only conditionalities placed in these permissive licenses. There'll be further protections for the open source developer, like maybe protection against patent claims, etc. But you can use the source code however you want, including in completely proprietary software. So this has often, and these are some of the most popular licenses around the world for this reason, is that it is completely unrestrictive, the use of the code, which means that a private company which is will not be ready to open source their own work can freely take these open source components, combine them with their larger work, and sell it under a proprietary license where no one is allowed to peek under the hood or to access that code. That relative permissiveness of the permissive set of licenses, and the two most popular ones are MIT and Apache, means that particularly in the sort of US-based tech industry and the development of the open source communities around there, particularly currently, you do see open source communities flourish with a lot of support from large tech companies who contribute into the open source communities and are then free to use the outputs however they want. And so that is a particular direction in which particularly US and Europe-based open source communities have developed. And it's there where MIT and Apache are enjoying quite a bit of popularity, especially in the last 5 years or so. So you'd see that there is something called the middle ground set of licenses right there in the middle. And this sort of takes a little bit of the elements from both of these other categories. Right? What the middle ground licenses say is that if you are making modifications or changes to any code which has this middle ground license, and the Mozilla public license is an example. So if you are making changes to somebody else's Mozilla public license code, those particular changes must also be made available under the Mozilla public license. However, if you're just taking code and unchanged, you are combining it with some of your own code to create a larger work that can be distributed under a variety of licenses, including a proprietary license, a more permissive license, etc. Right? So your work remains yours. Unlike the copyleft licenses, your work also doesn't have to be made open source. However, the work that was created in open source must continue to remain in open source, including any modifications or enhancements you're making directly to the open source code that you have used. So that is that's been taken. It doesn't have this virality of the copyleft license, which means in the copyleft licenses, any code that is GPL code, once it touches some other code, that other code also becomes, has to become copyleft. That is not a conditionality with the middle ground licenses, where it's only the original code that must continue to be in open source. However, additional code that is being developed, modules that are being connected to MPL code, any of that can remain proprietary. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions on the three, or yes, please.
Your views regarding usage of SSPL or community public licenses with MOSIP.
Right.
So how does it impact us? Well, because there are a lot of services which are coming up under those licenses,
Right.
like MongoDB or any
Yes.
Elasticsearch. So
Yes.
how do we use it with MOSIP?
Right. I will rephrase. Right. I'll just rephrase and maybe answer
so
this
no
question
to
and move
sit-
on. We do have a fair amount of time, so that
assistant.
gives us the
So
advantage
these are
of being
few,
able to have a discussion.
Use cases that we are now, experimenting
Could
at the
someone
core level.
handle this?
So the whole idea is to make the whole foundational.
This has been happening on and off, so didn't come as a surprise. Right. So the two questions here was about the use of different licenses for different parts of product strategy, right? And that I think works very well with my original point about the starting point often is what is the strategy with this platform or this product, and also who is your ecosystem. And I'll share a little bit more later about how MOSIP thought about its strategy and its ecosystem, and therefore its choice of licensing. And the answer often is that even within the same organization, and this is also quite a contemporary development, people are not too evangelical about a single license. You know, you're not like a GPL person, therefore everything must be GPL. You think about the different things you're developing and what they are going to work with, and therefore, and who they are going to work with, more importantly, and therefore what license is most appropriate to what components you're developing. And often the way that the market has developed, or, which is kind of an inevitability all of us have to deal with, the market and the players in that market have a lot to do with the determination of how
Listen, as
you
one
will
I-
choose your license and how that
We-
will develop. The second
secure
question was about
and tech,
the
in the
newer
verification process.
licenses that have come up,
this is
and how those will work with MOSIP. We're addressing that a little bit later, so we'll definitely be getting into that. But broadly speaking, actually, there are many complicated diagrams, maybe some of you have seen them, on the compatibility of these different kinds of licenses, right? And that is often a question, saying that I have a piece of code under an LGPL license, and you have a piece of code under a Mozilla license. Can we combine these two together to make something, right? Not every license is compatible with each other. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but broadly, the most permissive licenses work well with everything upstream, whereas the copyleft licenses do require the continuation of more copyleft terms. So the middle ground licenses will work very well with everything downstream. Again, so a MPL with an MIT Apache or another kind of permissive license, there shouldn't be any problem. I saw another hand up.
Yes, so I wanted to clarify a little bit on the copyleft license, right, and the virality of LGPL, because, for example, I mean, a sister project of MOSIP, right, is OpenG2P.
Yes.
And OpenG2P is based on code that is LGPL, and
Right.
then it's extending NPL. And so all the OpenG2P code is on MPL, and then some implementation can stay private. So I wanted to make sure people understand that LGPL is slightly different from GPL, and the virality is different. The virality stops at the library level and not at the application level, right? So on LGPL, you can get Mozilla on top of it, and then private code, and countries can have their own private customization on top of
Right.
it. So.
No, thank you. Each of these licenses, again, do have differences. I broadly categorize them, and happy to get into detail with anyone after the session. But there are reasons so folks who felt that the GPL was not meeting all of their requirements, then there was the development of the LGPL, etc. So there are important differences, and they can make a huge difference to the way your product develops as well. So thank you for that intervention. So we wanted to, as I'm sure everybody is aware, MOSIP has chosen the Mozilla public license as its license, and we've extended this choice to other DPIs that are also now being developed. So the components of OpenG2P developed at IIIT Bangalore are also under the Mozilla public license. And so far we have had a set of experiences that have supported our choice. We wanted to share a bit of our reasoning and also talk about what the future will hold on this. So, as I explained, because the Mozilla public license is a middle ground license, what we did before we embarked on this choice, and we looked very closely at Apache in particular as an alternative, and that is something we considered along with the Mozilla public license before settling here. And our main choice was dictated by our understanding of the ID landscape in Africa, particularly the fact that MOSIP was introduced looking at the pernicious challenges of vendor lock-in, the players and the users of this code that are there in this continent, and also other countries that would be consumers of this code. We did feel that there was necessity to have this balance between ensuring that the source code remained open. So the code that was being developed with philanthropic contributions as a digital public good continued to remain open, the very core of it, while we were extremely keen that we allowed for peripheral or enhancements that are built on top of the core platform. And we felt that the Mozilla public license allowed for this. It allowed for the core to remain open, but it also allowed for enhancements on top. Those enhancements would come from the market, could remain proprietary, and would be an incentive for more and more companies to use this open source product, but also to have their own commercial developments on top of it and be able to have a reason to go to market and generate revenue in that way. And we felt that while the MIT and Apache licenses are also very market friendly in that way, there were greater risks, particularly in our context, particularly in the context of the DPIs and the countries in which we were working in, that there was a chance that all of this would be locked in, or all of this would end up in proprietary closed box products, as had been the case in the past. And one of the ways in which we wanted to make sure this didn't happen was by using the Mozilla public license. And so far, we have had experiences with vendors, with countries who have taken some time to understand this. None of this was tried before, right? There hasn't been open source national critical infrastructure of a government at this scale before. And so just the very use of open source, let alone the use of Mozilla public license, was new to most of the actors in this space. So there has been a lot of explanation, a lot of education, a lot of answering questions, and a lot of learning for ourselves also. But 5 years in, we feel that our choice has borne up, but we've also learned new things along the way that are modifying our thinking right now. So what the adoption of the Mozilla public license means for MOSIP is that users of this code are allowed to modify the source code itself, but those modifications should continue under the Mozilla public license, which just means that it has to be made open source somewhere under MPL. However, if you are not modifying our code, so if you're not making file level changes to our code, but are instead just building connectors or building enhancements, those can remain proprietary. So a larger work immediately doesn't entirely come under MPL or any other open source license. Parts of it remain open source and parts of it can remain proprietary. All of this only applies to further distribution of such enhanced or modified code. So if a country is consuming a Mozilla public licensed code, making changes and using it within their own country, we do not consider it as distribution of open source software, and therefore we do not require countries to make such modifications open source. This is also giving due regard to national security and other considerations of governments. So we want governments to have complete control over their own code base, but we also want to encourage the commercial ecosystem to continue to have the core of this software remain in the open while building derivatory proprietary products on top. So that was the thinking 5 years ago. As I said, the choices have been borne up so far. But as the platform matured, we have also, if you go to our GitHub repositories, you will see other components that are under other licenses. So essentially, as I said, the most important thing for us was to have the core of the MOSIP platform remain open. But we were often building more peripheral components, mainly as reference implementations. The kind of enhancements on top were not something that MOSIP wants to necessarily retain control over or maintain over a long period of time. We just wanted to develop these as examples of what could be done for the commercial ecosystem to pick up, or for a government to customize, modify, and use in their own countries. So we wanted these more peripheral components to be very easy to customize, modify, use however you want. So less restrictions there. And so some of these peripheral components intended as reference designs, for example, the Android registration client, which is something, if it is kind of a front-facing component, it will necessarily have to have a lot of customizations and modifications to suit a particular country context, right? All those changes we have therefore released under a more permissive license. We've released under the MIT license in this case. And as we go forward, we want to maintain this distinction between what is the core and what is the periphery. We want the core to remain open. We think the Mozilla public license is a useful one in doing this. And we want more innovation and enhancements on top, and more participation from the commercial ecosystem, which we're already seeing. And we believe this balance and this thinking about each new development and what is the appropriate license for each component is the way forward for us. Yeah, that was my piece. Happy to take questions. Both Satish and I would be happy to take questions. I know there's a lot of expertise in this room. So if you either want to talk about using MOSIP code and how the license affects you, or you have other open source projects of your own, be happy to chat and take any questions either now or offline.
So my hypothetical question is, if I'm a systems integrator and I saw that the code needs some changes, and so I made some of those some changes to improve it. Though if I understand your talk correctly, I am required to sort of make that under MPL, also, right? And if because I made some changes to that and I want to sell those or distribute those changes, maybe sell it, then it has to be under the MPL code. So I just wanted to clarify if that's the case.
Yeah, thank you. That's really goes at the heart of the use of the MPL license. The license states that distribution of modified code must be under the MPL. And so it kind of hinges on what you mean by distribution. Generally speaking, we encourage countries, vendors, etc., to contribute their enhancements back into the open source. This has multiple benefits that Satish also talked about. You don't want development going off in different directions where the proprietary changes are taking one path while the open source development is taking another path, because then you don't continue to have the same kind of support and ecosystem that the open source community has. The benefits of that are not going into the closed product, right? So as a general rule, we encourage the contribution back into open source of any modifications. But if that is not possible for any reason, it would hinge on whether that modified code is actually being distributed. So sale by a vendor of that modified code certainly counts as distribution. And so that modification must be available under MPL somewhere. But in-country use may not necessarily be distribution under all circumstances. And so you don't have to open source every modification you make to our code. That is our interpretation. There's not a lot of practice around any of this. So we are also learning as we go along and are always willing to change our minds as circumstances evolve. But so far, as I said, this has borne up well for us.
I'll just add a couple of things to that. So this is more in terms of what do we consider as a change, because when we start using a project, the changes can be at two levels. One is the change to the core itself, Now, it's a recommended practice if you're changing the core. It's a recommended practice to contribute it back to the community, because if you don't contribute it back, at some point it might become a maintenance liability, because the open source side of things might have changed the way the development is going forward, and your customized code might not be compatible with maybe a future release, and this is when the customization is at the core, right? But if the customization is basically an enhancement to the core, which itself is an independent piece that is kind of leveraging the core capabilities, but that's an independent piece that is only consuming a certain set of published APIs from the core, yet that can stay as a completely different project or as an independent project, right? It can have its own life, its own license, and everything defined by the developers.
Thank you, Srijoni. Thank you. It was a lovely talk. The question I have is, in the context of countries, up till now, countries are really not looking at distributing MOSIP, but in the future, you could have that scenario. And you have at one level, countries would want to change the code to whatever they want to do. And another level, if they want to distribute that code, so there is, at one level, they can keep it all proprietary when they're doing it for themselves. But if they want to distribute, they need to make it open. So what would be your advice or suggestion to countries exploring that path, where if they're looking to make modifications as well as look at, distribute, how should they navigate that so that they can actually do both in that sense?
I think my answer to that would be, as the MOSIP experience has shown, if the interest is in distribution and in showing to the world, it might be in a particular region, it might be more global ambitions, open sourcing actually helps in that. And we've seen examples of more closed proprietary products not really having the same kind of reach. We've had several testaments from government developers here saying just the ability to go to GitHub and see what is there helps them make their decisions, right? So even for a government that has made great innovations on top of the MOSIP platform, if their interest now is in sharing that with the world, open source goes a long way towards making that happen. And is not necessarily an impediment in that. So to think about that, of course, choice of license, etc., are important strategic considerations. But overall, I think it is more of a push in the direction that you already want to go, and that would be a reason to continue to adopt open source.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that, because this is quite a popular question, because when it comes to an open source project, it's only one part of your user experience. For example, like when we talk about MOSIP or MOSIP getting customized or MOSIP getting forked, that's only one part of it. Now, I have a forked MOSIP code base or any other project code base, but a real user experience that has been built on this project is the entire ecosystem. For example, like if MOSIP is as the main project or the core project is the one that the ecosystem is tracking, so that every other project that is associated with it, be it the biometric drivers, be it the management softwares, or all kind of other components, are tracking the MOSIP development cycle and keep on updating it to the latest version. And if I'm ending up with a fork, and that fork is not going to get the same ecosystem support, right, with all the vendors that is in the ecosystem. So it's always kind of a good practice to have the core is always aligned with the main development branch, because that's where the ecosystem roadmap also get aligned.
All right, if there's nothing else, thank you everyone. We had a great time discussing this with you, and happy to continue these conversations.